Thank you.
We're recording.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sharon Starr from the Woods and Wetlands group of the Sierra Club. That's in Lake County. I'm talking to you from Libertyville tonight. And Pat Nuccio and I have been very active, and she's actually taking on the leadership of the plastics team of the Illinois Sierra Club. And so we're doing a lot of education, and that's a primary goal of what our plastics team is all about. We're trying to reduce single-use plastics. It's a huge environmental problem, but the good news is there are things we can do about it. So I'm going to share my screen, and we can begin. Okay, are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we are.
Good. Okay. So Take a Pass on Plastic is the title of our campaign. And it's all about how we as individual consumers can make a difference. So we'll start with trying to get my mouse to work here. The facts and figures. You know, why is plastic a problem and how big a problem is it? So basically, it's huge and it's growing. It's hard to even imagine when we talk about 398 million metric tons of plastic. I mean, that's not even imaginable. But the fact is, it is gigantic. It's growing. I mean, you can see how much plastic has been around since probably the early 40s, and but the growth since in the last 40 some years has been phenomenal. And the industry is projecting higher growth, continuing on and on. The U.S., by the way, is the #1 producer in the world of plastic. Plastic is 90% petroleum, which is significant industry that's behind it. The oil industry is probably very concerned about its future in light of the move away from fossil fuel vehicles to electric. And they're looking for a new growth market. And plastic is it. They really see great potential for producing more plastic, and they're doing their best to drive up demand, and they're ramping up production to meet that. So at every stage of its life cycle, plastic actually is a major contributor to climate change. From the drilling of oil to the refining, manufacturing, packaging, shipping to retailers and consumers, and then disposal, ultimately. And 1/3 of plastic is used once and thrown away. So it's everywhere. I mean, we all know that. We may never get rid of all plastic, but it's all around us. And there are some plastics we can certainly do without. Millions of products either are made of plastic or they're packaged in plastic. It's been interesting doing research on this subject because we found that one of the biggest sources of plastic in the environment is fabrics. Synthetic fabrics contain plastic, and that plastic gets into the environment from washing it, drying it, and disposing of it. The most common types of synthetics you've probably seen on many things: nylon, polyester, and acrylic. I've read studies that say 35% of the microplastics in the ocean are from textiles, and 92% of the microplastics in North American Arctic sea ice is from textiles. There's also nonstick cookware, which has fluoropolymers, and I can't comment on the chemistry of this because that's outside my area of expertise, but we've got some good people with that expertise researching this for us. As you've probably heard, plastics are choking our oceans, lakes, rivers, waterways, all around the world. The plastic waste that the U.S. produces, much of it has been shipped to other countries for disposal, but those other countries are running out of space. They don't have the infrastructure to handle it all, and some of them have banned the import of plastic from the U.S. It tends to pile up on seashores and riverbanks and gets washed into the water. More than 8 million tons of plastic waste enter the oceans every year. And it's closer to home than that. Researchers have found that 22 million pounds of plastic enter the Great Lakes each year, and just over half of that is in Lake Michigan. If you're looking at the litter that's in local bodies of water, in the Chicago River, 50% of it is plastic. In the Mississippi River, 75% is plastic. We've all seen the horrible accounts and photos of wildlife, particularly marine wildlife, being entangled in plastic, killed by it, ingesting it, and so on. But that's really the tip of the iceberg. The infiltration of plastic into our environment is far greater, and the problems even more profound. The plastic in our landfills is leaching into the soil and the groundwater. And those microplastics, it breaks down into microplastics, and the microplastics last thousands of years. And they contaminate our food and drinking water with toxic chemicals. So we've spent some time recently researching the health effects of plastic, because we know it's everywhere, and we also know that it's in us. A lot of research has shown that plastics are in living creatures, animals, humans, everyone. I mentioned that 90% of plastic is fossil fuels. It also has chemical additives, and about 10,000 different kinds of chemicals. And many have not been tested at all, or certainly not tested thoroughly, and they were never tested for human consumption, because that's what they were never intended for. But in fact, we are consuming them. And those that have been tested have shown to have possible impact on the endocrine system, in other words, hormone disruptors. They're found to cause cancer and contain neurotoxins. Because more than half the plastic waste on Earth has been generated in just the last 15 years, we don't really know what the long-term health effects are. We haven't lived with this much plastic for a long time yet. So we don't really understand the long-term health impact. But the fact that they're in us and contain toxic chemicals certainly should give us pause. I'm not sure I want to wait around to find out whether it's going to impact our health. Scientists are doing some research and finding out that it may very well be doing that. So the next slides are based on research we've done very recently that are new studies showing definite areas of concern as regards human health. So we're going to take a few minutes and just give you some of the highlights of those findings before we go back into plastic as a pollution problem and what we can do about it. So first of all, it's in the air. Plastics get into the air that we breathe. And studies have shown plastics found in lungs, in human airways, raising concerns for respiratory health issues. It's in the mucus system. Mucus, of course, is our first line of defense against infections and toxins. And there was a study that established a link between the exposure to airborne or waterborne particulate matter from plastics and several health conditions. People with inflammatory bowel disease actually have more microplastics in their waste than healthy people. Why? Don't know. We don't know if the plastics are causing the incidence of IBD or the other way around. I don't know if maybe they're more susceptible to it, but either way, there is a connection there. And it just goes on and on. There are different areas of the body. Nanoplastics can impact the metabolism. Researchers have found in zebrafish embryos plastic particles that accumulated in several organs, including liver, intestines, kidney, and brain. And they observed behavioral abnormalities in the embryos and a significantly impaired liver function. Microplastics also in the body attract antibiotic-resistant bacteria and pathogens, which enables them to grow in our bodies. And there is evidence that microplastics have crossed the brain-blood barrier. That is scary. Plastics have been found deep in the brains of test subjects. There was a study at the University of Rhode Island with mice that found that ingesting drinking water with a moderate amount of microplastics, even just in 3 weeks, caused behavioral changes that were similar to human dementia in how they presented. They also caused immune markers in the liver and brain tissues to change, and they found that the results, the impact on their behavior was more pronounced the older the mice were. So older creatures are more susceptible and suffer more from the impact of this. But they all exhibited issues. So back to now that I've got everyone's attention, and I sorry to lead with such a grim picture, but we're going to get to some more positive things as we talk about what happens to plastic waste. Right now, and this is part of the bad news, less than 6% of plastics were recycled in the US as of 2018. And I don't know if there are any recent data, but not from, this is the most recent from the US EPA. 9% only is recycled worldwide. So, I mean, there's nobody that's really able to recycle a lot of plastic. More than 3/4 of plastic in the US went into landfills, and the rest was burned, which is also not a good solution. Even so-called recyclable plastic is not recycled in most cases due to the cost and the limited demand. It's a market-based, it's a very inefficient market. Let's just put it that way, and it's not working. And many items are simply not recyclable, like straws, utensils, and other types of plastic. Most single-use plastic is not. So why is so little plastic recycled? I mentioned the inefficient market. There are a lot of aspects to this. First of all, new plastic is very cheap to produce because of the abundance of low-cost shale gas that's used to make it. So companies prefer it. Give them something that consumers will buy and it's cheap. They'll take that. So recycling plastic is an expensive process that adds cost to the resulting plastic. Also, even when plastic is recycled, if it's refabricated into something else, it's what we call downcycled. In other words, every time that process happens, the plastic is degraded. And after just a handful of times, it becomes unusable, and then it ends up in the landfill. And many of the things that are made from recycled plastic, like carpeting and park benches, are just not replaced often enough to provide a strong market for it. There are many different kinds of plastic, and not all of them can be recycled. You've all seen the chasing arrows symbol. That does not mean recyclable. And for decades, the industry has been putting it on plastic as, a suggestion that it is not true. The number that you typically see inside the chasing arrow symbol, that is a system of numbers developed by the industry, by the plastic industry, for its corporate customers and others, and for their own use, to identify the type of plastic based on different properties of the plastic. And that's really not of much use to consumers, other than the fact that numbers 1 and 2 tend to be more easily recyclable. The others are not typically, but that doesn't mean that they will be or can be recycled. So basically, the long and short of it is that most of them end up in landfills. So recycling alone is not going to solve the problem. And I know there are many different things coming out now. There are companies claiming to have recyclable packaging. It's plastic, recyclable plastic. And what we found in most of those cases is that it's only recyclable in commercial recycling facilities. These are very specialized plants. There are only a few of them in the country, and they're really designed for industry. They don't get recycle waste from communities, from people. So, your stuff that goes into the recycle bin is not going to go to those commercial recycling facilities, and those are the only ones that can recycle those plastic packaging and containers that claim to be recyclable plastic. They don't tell you that. Maybe they do in the small print somewhere, but basically, they're often not truly recyclable. What I would say is when you do recycle, and certainly do it, I mean, just because it's not the whole answer to the problem doesn't mean it's not a good thing to try and do. Just follow the guidelines of what to recycle. You can get that information from your local waste management company or your town's public works department. But learn about the rules. There are websites here. SWANC is the Northwest Cook County organization, and SWALCO is for Lake County. These are the counties that recycle our waste, and they have good websites with lots of information that tell you exactly what you can recycle, what you can't, and how to do it. So what can we do as individuals? And actually there is quite a lot that we can do to reduce our own consumption of single-use plastics. We make decisions every day, especially when we're shopping, that give us an opportunity to reduce the amount of single-use plastic that's used. We try to sort of group these. It's easier to remember a sort of an acronym or something that the 4 R's. Refuse disposable plastic waste or disposable plastic whenever possible. Reduce your plastic footprint by cutting down on consumption of goods with lots of plastic packaging and parts. Reuse things like durable straws, utensils, bottles, bags, containers, all kinds of everyday items can be washed and reused. And what you can't recycle or what you can't eliminate, from your consumption, you can try to recycle if it's possible to do that. So let's start with refuse. When you go to the store, tell merchants that you don't use single-use plastic. I did that this morning at the Libertyville Farmers Market. That's a place where you'd think, they're giving you organic vegetables in a plastic bag. Seems kind of incongruous, but they're shocked. I tell them that, and then it's kind of like, oh, yeah, I suppose that's a good idea. But I bring my own basket, and I bring small containers in the basket that I can use for small things like berries or green beans or something. And so all my shopping I do with bags and from that I keep in the trunk of my car. And that's what you can do. Also thank merchants when they do something that when they have eco-friendly products and policies, because that tells them that you as a consumer are paying attention and it's important to you, and that will stick with them. So don't accept plastic bags when you're shopping. I would advise not accepting any bags, including paper, because it may not be as bad as plastic, although some people say it is. But it costs trees, and it's more waste. So if you bring your own reusable bags, there's no problem there. If you're ordering beverages out, when you place your order, don't wait until they bring it to the table, because it may already have a straw in it. Tell them no straws, please, and try to avoid taking stir sticks or plastic cup lids. And with carryout, you can specify no plastic bags, and also no cutlery, straws, plastic containers, etc. You may have to take your stuff in the plastic containers that they provide, but you can always ask them if you can bring your own container for them to fill. By all means, avoid polystyrene foam. Styrofoam is a brand name, but that's the most common one. It is the worst kind of plastic. it breaks down into these little pellets and just gets everywhere, and it's very, very toxic. There are places, in fact, there's a bill that just passed in the Illinois House, I think, that is designed to ban styrofoam from state-owned food service operations. It's a small step, but it's a step in the right direction. Many people are beginning to recognize that styrofoam is a huge problem. Also, don't buy items that are individually wrapped in single-serving packages, like coffee pods. I know Keurig is popular and all of that, and it's convenient when you just want one cup of coffee. But individually wrapped stuff, in a package is not always necessary. I've found that with tea bags, you can get some boxes of tea bags that are just tea bags in the box. They're not individually wrapped, and I do look for those. Reduce your plastic footprint consumption by cutting down on goods with plastic parts and packaging. There's good old tap water in a glass for a start. We all used to drink water in a glass at home. And if you have concerns about your water supply, there are very economical filters that you can get to purify your water. But whatever your water comes from, try to drink it in a glass that you use at home, or have a reusable water bottle that you can use at home or take it with you. And the really soft plastic water bottles are not meant to be reused, and they really can't be properly cleaned. And chemicals can leach out of those with every use. So I would avoid those for sure. When you're shopping for groceries, look for produce that's available in bulk, like bulk carrots, potatoes, peppers, whatever, instead of prepackaged produce. Go back to bar soap. The plastic pump soap containers, not really necessary. There's bar soap around still. In fact, you can even get shampoo and conditioner in bar form. I use that now. Instead of liquid. With laundry detergent, you can find powdered laundry detergent in boxes. You don't have to buy the liquid stuff in the tubs. There's also, and this is what I use, laundry sheets that you can get online that are, it's a little envelope that comes with 50 sheets inside. Each one is a load of laundry. I mean, it's really economical. It makes great suds. It'll wash your clothes, and you don't have to use any packaging other than this little this one cardboard envelope. It's really great. You can buy milk and juice in recyclable cartons or glass bottles. When I mentioned before about fabrics, when you're buying clothes, look for natural fibers, things like cotton, wool, linen, and other natural. Alpaca and hemp are used in clothing sometimes. Actually, alpaca is the warmer than wool. It's amazing. And look for textiles that are sustainably grown and humanely harvested. Choose cookware that doesn't use fluorinated coatings, such as Teflon. That's one that is fluorinated. You can switch to bamboo toothbrushes. I mean, these are tiny things, but they do add up. Those are available online, probably in some stores, but mostly online. You can replace plastic sponges with scouring pads or scrubbers made of wood and natural bristles. Basically, anything you can't find in a store, you can find online. And there are companies that are dedicated to providing responsible, environmentally responsible products that have a lot of these things. So reuse things. Reuse and repair things you already own. And if you're thinking about buying something new to replace something that's old or, worn out, or maybe, in disrepair, think about whether you can repair it, mend it, and reuse it. I mentioned taking reusable shopping bags everywhere. I keep them in my trunk because if I don't know if I'm going to be stopping on the way home from someplace else to shop, I've got them. I don't have to remember to bring them with me. Take reusable water bottles, travel mugs, etc. And bring your own containers for leftovers. If you're in a restaurant and you typically want to take some food home, if you've got a container with you, they'll usually let you, put that in your own container. And avoid a styrofoam clamshell box, which is what they mostly use in restaurants. One strategy is to keep a go bag in your car. It's just basically a bag that has reusable containers for leftover food, utensils, straws, anything you might need when you're out of the house. I know it sounds like a pain, but you can wash out plastic bags and containers for reuse. And that way, you've got plastic, you've already got it, so you can continue to use it and avoid using more. You can also use those containers for packing lunches and, snacks for the road. Bring your own mug to your favorite coffee place. A lot of places will let you do that. You can save dry cleaning bags and use them to store clothes, etc. And so recycle what you can't avoid. Clean everything that you're going to recycle. It has to be clean, and in the case of flexible film, like saran wrap or something, that can be recycled too, but it also has to be dry, clean and dry. Always put your items in the recycle bin loose, never in a bag. If they're in a bag, the people who pick them up aren't going to go through your stuff. They're just going to pick up the bag and say that's trash and throw it in the trash compactor. It's not going to be recycled. So make sure your recyclable items are loose. You can recycle beverage bottles and larger plastic containers. They tend to be more likely to be recycled than other things. Also, we were told at a tour of a Swalco recycling plant that you want to put caps and lids back on containers to recycle them. And the reason to do that, even if it's a different material, like you've got a metal cap on a glass bottle, whatever, it doesn't matter. Put it back on, and because that's the only way that those tiny items like caps and lids are going to make it through the recycling process and not fall through the belt that they have these things on to determine what they can keep and what to get rid of. So if you want to recycle those small things, that's the way to do it. You can take clean plastic bags and plastic wrap to places that collect them. Most grocery stores do. I don't know what they do with them, but they do collect. They must have, some place that they're taking them, and so you can drop off those things there. And again, learn about your local recycling rules so that you can recycle effectively. And that does it. We have the plastics team is going strong, and we typically meet monthly. We have a lot of projects that are going on, things like setting up tables in grocery stores to educate consumers who come in, and also visiting restaurants to get them to make cutlery and straws available by customer request only. That's a small step they can take that's a win-win for them and for the environment. But our Sierra Club groups, and yours in Northwest Cook, you have a group there. The group in Lake County is doing a lot of things like clean energy, open spaces, lakes, planting and gardening, a whole host of things. And I'm sure the Northwest Cook group has a variety of projects too that are helpful to the environment. So anyway, there's a lot more information about plastics on the Woods and Wetlands website, which you can see here, sierraclub.org/illinois/woods-wetlands. And in Northwest Cook, the same address, but northwest-cook-county. So please contact us, and people are always welcome to attend our meetings and see what's going on and hopefully get involved. So there's also a QR code here, which if you see it on your screen, you can scan it. And that'll take you also to the Woods and Wetlands Plastics page, where you can read more about it. So that is it. And I would be happy to entertain any questions that you have.
Thank you, Sharon. Are there any questions either in the chat or any here? And let's start here at Spring Valley. Does anybody want to come up to the screen here and answer a question, ask a question, or relay it here?
Well, I have, like Trader Joe's, they use these compostable, it's like plastic, but it's, it says right on it that it'll deteriorate easily. So how about pushing more of that to all the grocery stores?
The question's about compostable plastics and why isn't there more of that?
Well, compostable plastic is problematic. It's a really new field, and there just haven't been many any ways of really composting it. There are some research projects in process, but they're years away from being commercialized. And I've read things about labs that are looking at certain bacteria that eat plastic, and but these are very early stage things, and they're not really available for use yet. They haven't been developed to that point. I hope they will be.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
When I do have to wash out something that's plastic that I'm going to recycle, I'm always weighing whether or not it's the plastic or the water. What's the worst of the two evils? So I don't know if that's a question, but just, if she can address that perhaps.
Are you talking about contamination?
No, I'm talking about, okay, so we've got clean drinking water that I'm using to wash out
Oh.
plastic so that it can be recycled, and then that water's going down the drain, so, it's,
Wasting
what am I
water.
wasting more of?
Oh, I see. So, rinsing out, well, it kind of is related to contamination because in order for like recycling, no one's going to buy it, right? Unless it's like wet or still got residue of like, what was in it, right? So you rinse it out. Yeah. And so there's an issue of like, okay, now I'm wasting water.
Yeah, it's there are often trade-offs with these things, but I think that one is really minimal, just because if you're doing dishes, I still do dishes by hand because I just have a few dishes and I don't want to waste a whole cycle on the the dishwasher on a few things, but I'll put my recyclables in there too, and just use the water that I've got in the sink. It doesn't have to be a lot of water. You don't have to, the items have to be free of grease and food, basically. So, it can be just, wiping them out with a soapy sponge. It doesn't have to involve a lot of water, I don't think.
And I'd like to add to that.
They also have to be free of like paper tags or that are stuck on.
Paper
No,
what?
they don't.
Label.
No, they're not.
Oh.
Okay.
No, they don't. You can, they have, the recycling plants have machines that will, I think, blast hot water at them or something. They automatically will take off all the labels and, paper that's stuck onto cans and bottles. And, yeah. So you don't have to do that.
Yeah. It was my understanding that like water is considered a contamination in order for the recycling to be sellable. People aren't going to buy it if it's wet.
Well, no, I'd like to make a comment on that, Jim. So to get to Sharon's point, you don't have to like wash it like you're gonna wash it like a dish or something. I basically sometimes will, like if I have some salad dressing or something, I put like a little bit of water in, shake the thing, swish it around, and I mean, that's rinsed. Yeah, there might be some residue in there. It's not like it's going to be perfect. So I understand. I mean, I have heard people say, you're wasting water and all that. And I can understand why that would be a concern, but it really, as Sharon says, it's minimal. And you're just trying to not make it look grody, but you don't have to be perfect in scrubbing it out like you know, like you're gonna eat off of it again.
Yeah, I mean, if it's greasy, put a drop of dishwashing liquid in there, and when you put the water in, shake it around, and you pretty much get rid of most of the grease that way.
We usually, we try to keep buying 2 liters to a minimum, but okay, so a 2-liter bottle and then just invert it in like a dish that's ready to go into the dishwasher, and then it drains it out and then it's pretty dry, and then put the cap on, like you said, because they use air compressors to separate it, separate the plastic bottles in the conveyor line.
Well, that air, they don't use air. We went to Gruit Industries and they actually use optical scanners. So these optical scanners are designed to identify the kind of plastic that's traveling on the conveyor belt underneath them. And if the optical scanner identifies a plastic like 1 or 2 that is more usually commonly and easily recyclable, it'll let it pass through. But we actually saw these robotic arms reach out into and grab a hold of plastics and like throw them off the conveyor belt if they were plastics that were not meant to be recycled. And I'll tell you, I mean, I have seen some weird plastic things people think about plastics being recycled. I actually saw a step stool, a plastic step stool, one of those hard plastic things thrown in a recycle bin. It's like, no. So there are plastics that are clearly not going to be recyclable, but
they also have people, actually looking at the stuff. A lot of it is mechanized, but they also have humans, actually looking at stuff and making sure. And, between the two, they really do a very good job of identifying, what they can keep and what has to be thrown out.
But that's, to get to Sharon's point, that's also a reason why, if you're going to do recycling, that you do it smart recycling. And not every village has the same criteria for recycling. When we went to Gruit, they have some special process for identifying black colored plastic, for example, which they said could be recycled, but other facilities don't have the optical scanner to be able to identify that, and so it's not recyclable. So, but that's part of the challenge of recycling, is that different municipalities and different recycling companies have different criteria. They have different places that they can sell the products to. And so it's hard for people to know what can be recycled and what's not. If you go to your local village public works or whatever, they do usually have signs or stickers that you could put on bins that will at least tell people what to do and what not to do. Not that that actually sometimes works, but plastic bags, for example, as Sharon was saying, I did do some investigation. We looked at that, and there are companies, at least in this area here, that actually use those plastic bags that you drop off at Jewel and those kinds of stores. They actually do take them and recycle them. But not every place is going to be reliable in that regard, and not everybody's going to be able to reuse the plastic bags. So you have to kind of do some digging research on your own. But that's why our focus in this campaign is plastic reduction, because it's almost impossible to generalize about plastic recycling.
And it's problematic. It's minimally effective, which is no reason to stop doing it. It helps, but it's only a small contributor to the solution. It's never going to solve the problem. And with the amount of growth that we're expecting in the production of plastic, we've got to really do much more, and reducing our need for it is the way to go.
So I have a couple of questions. One of them is about recycling, and maybe you already covered this. Sorry, I was not here for a couple of minutes, but beyond number 1 and number 2, plastic, does any of the rest of it actually get recycled, like ever? Is it worth it to put 3 and 4 and 5 into the recycling bin, or does it make more sense just to send them to a landfill if you have unfortunately acquired them?
I would say that, yeah, it's probably, you're not going to get 3s and 4s recycled. I think there's one higher number. Pat, maybe you remember what it is,
I
like
thought it was
5
just
or
1 and 2.
so, yeah, it's, but there are only a few things. And so really it's 1 and 2. Yeah, I would limit it to 1 and 2. You know, I sometimes, if I'm in doubt, I may throw something in the recycling bin just because, well, you know, if they can recycle it, great. If they can't, they'll throw it out, which is what I would do otherwise. So, but yeah, I'd focus on the 1 and 2 ones.
Yeah, okay. And the other part, with indeed, reduce, reuse, recycle. That's the order of preference, right?
Mhm.
Use.
First thing
reduce.
is try to reduce. If you can't do that, reuse it, and if you can't do that, recycle it.
Yep.
So, but is there any hope of maybe passing some state legislation or some federal legislation that would make the people who package things in plastic in the first place responsible for accepting the plastic back and dealing with it themselves instead of putting it on the consumers to deal
Yeah.
with it?
There's a lot of, and Pat, you probably know more about this than I do, but there are lobbying efforts that are working on bills, at least at the state level, and I think at the federal level too. It's a long shot, but you know, groups that are lobbying and concerned about the issue and are studying the public policy route are definitely aiming for that. Maybe you can add to that, Pat.
Yeah, that's I mean that gets back to bottle bills. People are the industry, there's been a lot of opposition to bottle bills. In Europe, they have such a thing called the circular economy, and they actually do have some regulations in place that companies have to be able to accept back for proper disposal things that they're creating. So far, that's not happening in the United States, and it's a challenge because there was recently what's called a polystyrene ban, and Sharon mentioned this had to do with styrofoam. So this polystyrene ban was supposed to be put in place so that people had to phase out, anybody that was giving out polystyrene had to phase out the use of styrofoam. And for a lot of reasons, political and compromise and things like that, that legislation wound up only applying to government agencies. So trying to get something that's state or national is a challenge, and it could be the politics of our country, it could be the politics of the state, it could be the politics of the industry. I mean, there's a lot of variables, but ideally, you're right, that would be the best thing to do. And there are some bills that are pending that people are trying to say you have to cut back, you have to stop at this, but saying that you have to do this and actually implementing it and getting everybody in the industry, vendors, it can take a little bit more money sometimes to have vendors and restaurant owners purchase something that is not a plastic. It could take them more money to do that, and then you're putting a burden on the industry as well. And so that's that's something that people certainly have to consider from a financial point of view.
Yeah, industry is typically against this type of thing because it does add cost, but also there are big industry players that have incredible lobbying power, especially at the federal level, like the oil industry. And so, yeah, it's a high hurdle, but like Pat said, other places in the world have done it. And so I think what we're trying to do is, Sierra Club has a lobbying group and focuses a lot on legislation. Illinois Environmental Council also does. We partner with them. So there are groups working on it, and our grassroots members will support anything that's going on. If they're told there's a bill in committee, write to your congressman or whatever, we'll do it. So we support legislation in that way. But in the meantime, It may seem like the role of consumers is so negligible that it's almost not worth thinking about, but that's not true, because the more people we educate, the more people who start to reject single-use plastic or anything, any kind of plastic that they can do without, and they show their preferences and how they shop. Retailers and other businesses that depend on them for sales are going to get, it's going to get on their radar. And so gradually, with more and more people doing this, we can have an effect from the bottom up. It's not going to be fast, and but neither is the other. We just have to do both.
And I also
You know,
like my own personal little preference on things is that, as Sharon has mentioned, this is a grassroots effort as well. And we don't have to wait for federal or state legislation. We can go into our own municipalities and go into our village hall and trustees and go to meetings and express your concern. You know, if anybody wants to get details or anything, you know, we have a slide deck, you know, as Sharon illustrated. We can work with you on what you can say and how you can feel empowered to go into your municipality and say, you know, we'd like to see these kinds of things changes. Even something as simple as asking vendors to offer cutlery and straws instead of automatically giving it. In other words, allowing people to opt out. Even something as simple as that doesn't cost them anything. In fact, they're probably saving money.
They save money, yeah.
But they might not be thinking about that. It's just like,
Right.
oh, okay, automatic, you know. So that's the kind of thing you know, your municipality can work with the businesses in the area and say, you know, hey, would you be willing to do this? This is something that's good.
You know, it's Barbara Hill again. I just want to add one little postscript about Pat's description about the polystyrene ban that we put in this year. There was a silver lining to that, because the original bill was going to exempt educational institutions, but when it got shifted over so that it applies to state government, that meant that all of the public, you know, the Illinois colleges, the state colleges and universities are now included in it, which they would not have been under the original ban. So that was a little plus there.
And there was some discussion, from what I heard, that the legislators were interested in more. It just wasn't the right climate or the right time to do more, but we haven't forgotten. We'll come back.
We have a question over here.
Yeah. So this is very much putting the resolution of the issue on the consumer side, right? Which we have to do it as well. But manufacturer should also be able to say how their own product can be recycled and should be recycled. So, meaning that maybe there is room for legislation saying that you manufacture something, you get a proper certification, but you also need to provide the process, at least the description of the process on how to recycle what you are manufacturing. Because in a sense, they manufacture to what they want, and after that, it's for other people to solve the issues they basically create. So I was wondering if it's forcing manufacturer to describe at least the process to recycle or dispose properly of their own product, because they are the best one to know. A car manufacturer also should know how to dispose of the car, rather than putting in the car.
Jim, you're going to have to rephrase that. I didn't hear anything.
Well, what he's saying is that the onus for the responsibility is on consumers, but it should also be on manufacturers. You know, and what comes to mind is like chemical companies have MSDSs, material safety data sheets, and we just heard from Sharon that plastics are a very harmful thing, and it should almost be included in a material safety data sheet and go, how do we recycle this? And that was the gist of his comment, his question, is, they put the onus on the manufacturers on how, the safety of the plastics and how to mitigate that hazard.
But this is extend to a lot of stuff. For example, the computer industry, right? And hardware industry. So the waste and the disposed computer, they go to Ghana, where you've got people without any protection or anything that who are, recycling basically those stuff.
Cell phones.
Why don't the computer manufacturer describe how to properly dispose of the things they created?
Do you know of any sort of legislation that addresses that sort of, like an MSD, it's really only in a different.
Well,
aspect.
there is another advocacy group, which I don't get into here, but there are a number of plastic advocacy groups and consumer response, or what is it? Not consumer responsibility, producer responsibility legislation is something that has been on the radar for other advocacy groups. And so it's definitely, well, I shouldn't say definitely, it is not something that people aren't aware of. It's just difficult to operationalize that because of the complexity of the issue. Sharon, do you want to say more about
Yeah,
that?
I agree. And I think that just the fact that the research into the health impacts of plastic is so new and so nascent that I think now that people are starting to do that research and are producing results, I think there's a chance that that data, those findings, will motivate governments to create the structures that we need in order to identify the chemicals that are problematic and create regulation around those. So I think maybe the pieces needed are not all in place yet, but I think they're getting there. I hope we can do it.
Well, and I think as Sharon was saying, we've known, or there's been a lot of people that have known a lot of places that microplastics, those small pieces that don't completely degrade, people have seen a lot of different places that they exist. They exist in fish, they exist in other aquatic life, they exist in the water, they exist in our body, et cetera, et cetera. The challenge has been, so what? Nobody has a smoking gun, so to speak, that could say, this is what the problem is. That's why you need to stop doing this, and it takes a while. The process for banning chemicals or evaluating that could take years because they get input from various people, et cetera. But I think that, there's just recently, as Sharon mentioned, been some research that's looking at the specific health risks of these chemicals and the microplastics, not the fact that they're everywhere, but what do they do? And then once there's more data, more science data, not memes that go around and have all sorts of fancy sayings associated with them, but solid evidence that shows what the effects of these are, I think that provides evidence that legislation and advocacy groups and other environmental groups can take this to the EPA and FDA and say, look, there's evidence that this is a problem. Now we need to look at regulating this.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Sharon?
Yep, exactly.
So does that get to his or her question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there any plan to mine landfills?
To mine what?
Landfill, right?
Landfill.
Landfill, right.
Oh, landfill. To mine it?
Yeah.
You mean like a coal mine?
But yeah, I mean, you've got those heap of waste with plenty of stuff in it, right? So what about, mining them by, processing them and extracting what can be extracted instead of leaving them there?
The only thing I can think of is, natural gas, it comes from
You know, I have heard of the idea of mining landfills. I don't know that it's anything other than, you know, a thought that somebody's had about this would make sense. We could find, you know, it would be, we could get more stuff out of landfills than out of digging new holes in
Exactly.
other places.
Especially if stuff was put in there that we no longer put in there anymore, that could be used.
Well, retrieving aluminum, retrieving, you know,
Right.
all kinds of metals from landfills.
Yeah, right, okay. Yeah, I never even considered that, so thanks. Are there any more questions?
Well, I just wanted to share a quick comment. I think it's just a cute thing for me. I bought a silicone straw online, and it folds up in this little itsy bitsy metal container, and it's got a little brush, you know, to clean it, and I carry it with me in my car. So if I stop at McDonald's and I get a Coke or something, I say no straw, and I pull out my little silicone straw, stick it in, and I bring it with me to restaurants. You know, it's not to say that people don't look at me, but they look at me, and then I can educate them, and I can say, look, this is why I do this. So every moment is an education tool, and you can get these things online. They're pretty cheap, and you know, you get a little brush and clean it out, and yeah, whatever. That's it's just something I do. So the point is that these things aren't impossible to do, even on a little level. And you may not think you're making an impact, but when you're doing it and other people are looking at you and they're like, oh, what are you doing there for? You know, then it's a teaching moment.
You know, I just had a quick, you know, I know someone that actually took, you know, was involved, you know, mentioned grocery bags, plastic bags, and the technology to turn them into extrudable pellets has been around for like 40 years. I mean, you know, and, but what made me think, Sharon said earlier about, you know, the petroleum and, you know, the fossil fuel industry is just looking for more markets for plastic. And so doesn't recycling kind of foment that horrible ideal, you know, to like bring about, you know, it's an excuse, you know, to like, you know, create more markets, you know, and so
Yeah.
I the recycle part of it, and then, you know, Barb brought up the, you know, that it's kind of an order of priority. You know, it's kind of really far down on the list as a priority, the way I see it.
It's no accident that the people who are pouring the most money into pushing recycling of plastics is the industry, the oil industry and the plastic production industry. You know, I've seen big ad campaigns that had to be hugely expensive about new technologies for recycling plastic, which you know, it's not realistic. But yeah, it's greenwashing is basically what it is, because it's making people feel as if, okay, I don't need to worry about this so much because something's being done about it. Well, it's not. And what is being done is really minimally helping. So yeah, it is up to us.
Thank you, Sharon. I don't see any questions online. Did I miss anybody? It doesn't look like anything's been added in the chat. Last chance. Comments, questions?
So for those folks,
Oh,
I do have links in the chat. Jim put links in the chat too. So copy them now, even if you don't think you're going to be interested. Maybe you'll be interested later on, because these don't get saved in a recording. So just, you know, think about anything we've said. And if you're interested in learning more or getting involved, there's no commitment. You don't have to do anything big. You just have to be educated and help educate others. And that's really, I think, a big thing. And if you're able and willing to do more, we're willing to have you. So get involved. And there's a couple of ways you can click on links in order to do that. And when you see the slides, the QR code that Sharon did at the end is also a way to get to a website. So really take this to heart and see what you can do to find a way to empower yourself, because every little thing makes a difference. And even though it seems like, what can I do? I'm fighting an uphill battle like Sisyphus. Every time you do something, people are looking at what you do, and it's a ripple effect. So, and you're making a difference in your own life as well. Right, Sharon?
Yes,
we have
absolutely.
a couple questions here. Oh, sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, one thing that's aggravating me that I'm thinking of calling the companies and complaining is they take a recyclable #2 bottle and then they put envelope it in plastic, and then that makes it, then it says right on it, you can't recycle this now because it's got that plastic over the plastic label. Like for instance, I just had a protein drink, okay, and they were doing that. So how do they get by? How do they get it? It's like, because legislation is just so lax. Look at the stuff they pull. So it takes the consumer like me to call and complain, I'm not going to buy your product because you're taking something recyclable and you're making it non-recyclable. There's no use to that.
Well, here's a thought I had on that. If you all remember, maybe some of you don't remember, I don't know what the ages of people are on this call, but look how long it took for people to recognize there was a correlation, a strong cause and effect between smoking and cancer. It took a long time. That was a lot of public and citizen and advocacy and evidence. It took a while to get that going. This is really, I mean, when you think about the scheme of things, I mean, how long has this plastic awareness been an issue, Sharon? Maybe just a couple of years, would you say?
Yeah.
We're at the beginning. And so don't be discouraged when you see things. It took a while to get something solid, to make connections in the tobacco industry and have all that worked out. So we're just starting to get going here, but that's why the more people that are educated, the more people are involved, that ups the ante. It ups the pressure on industry. It ups the pressure on not only industry, but restaurants and other vendors. And that will up the pressure and make a difference. It's going to take a little time though, unfortunately, because I guess things move slowly when you're talking about changing public habits and against a big industry as well.
And it puts pressure on our elected officials too. I mean, the more consumers that are aware and care about this, the more their public elected officials are apt to respond and do something helpful legislatively. Absolutely true. And just the fact that there's so much new research being done on the health impact by scientists and universities, it's on their radar for sure, and the interest is growing.
Did you have something else, Jim? You were raising your hand.
Yeah, I was just going to make an observation. I haven't seen it, but I've heard that there's some new and fairly large exhibit at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago about plastic.
The Blue Planet, yeah. Sharon, you want to mention that blue?
Oh yeah, the Museum of Science and Industry. I didn't even know it was there. I just happened to go with a friend who wanted to go to see the Museum of Science and Industry about a month ago, and there was this incredible new exhibit called the Blue Paradox, which it's just beautiful and it's impactful and it's disturbing. It's not only about plastic in the ocean. I mean, that's kind of the main focus, but it covers the issues about plastic and recycling and human health, and I mean everything. Lots of facts and figures, lots of interactive things. It's really engaging, and I think it's a tremendous teaching tool. So I really would encourage anyone who can to get to the Museum of Science and Industry and see that exhibit. And it's not one of these special exhibits that you have to pay more to get into. You can see it as part of your general admission to the museum. It's great.
Thanks, John. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you very much, Sharon. Give her a lot of and thank you too, Pat.
You're welcome.
I'm the added on. Sharon is the main star here.
Thank you.